Please be seated. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Fuller.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Councilmember Shear.
Here.
Vice Mayor Simulescu.
Here.
Mayor Tucker.
Here. Item number 1 under administration, item number 1A, discussion, consideration, and possible action on accepting change order number 7 from a construction company. The business owner has asked that the council take no action on this item, and so I would make that motion that no action be taken on item 1A.
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Fuller.
Aye.
Councilmember Miller.
Aye.
Councilmember Shear.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Simulescu.
Yes.
Mayor Tucker.
Aye. Item number 1B, consideration of possible action to authorize a city council inquiry into the conduct of the city manager and investigation of municipal affairs related to the office of the city manager pursuant to the authority set forth in Oklahoma Statute 10-106, subpart 4.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just briefly, there was a Scrivener's error in that agenda item there. That should be Title 11 instead of Title 10. It's just a Scrivener's error. There's a second Scrivener's error on the agenda, and that's in the certificate at the bottom where it lists the posting dates of the meeting. That certificate was for the original posting date of this meeting. There's been a couple of subsequent updates to the agenda. Those were properly posted. The date just wasn't reflected in the certificate. So that's a Scrivener's error. They were properly posted, and we'll get an affidavit from the clerk confirming that.
Thank you.
Okay, so regarding 1B, I brought this forward just as we've had questions from citizens about certain moves within the city that might not always be able to go through the city manager, that we as city council need to address through our own investigations and our own terms. And so this just allows us to acquire that information on a legal term so that we can verify information, and then we can then in turn make sure that we can provide our citizens with what we feel is the accurate information so that we know what exactly is going on. Any questions?
Would you elaborate of what transpired to make you put this on our agenda?
Right. So we had a recent issue come about in which there was question in how it was handled. And then obviously if you're going to ask those questions, nobody's going to self-incriminate themselves. So you have to be very careful about how you go about finding that information. So to look at the facts is all that I'm asking for, that we are able to see those facts so that we can make our own determination as a council.
Were you given an answer as far as receiving that information? Were you given an answer to it?
When I requested information, it was denied based on confidentiality.
Okay. Tom, that's a question for you. What?
I will elaborate on that, specifically the question regarding a personnel matter, and those are confidential, individual. And I've had this discussion with Councilwoman Fuller. There are certain things that individual council members cannot do, and information that they cannot get. But Oklahoma statute gives the council as a whole rights to either inquire, conduct investigations, whatever they deem appropriate. And so I think that's the basis of this, is asking for an inquiry. And I don't obviously know all the details, but asking for the council to initiate an investigation or an inquiry into a particular situation beyond what an individual council member can do. Okay. So in that regard, it may be appropriate. It still may be that the inquiry and investigation, depending on the subject matter, may or may not be an appropriate matter for the council, but it is appropriate for the council as a whole to move forward rather than individual council members.
Okay, before you release that information, do you have to redact any personal information out of those documents?
I would hope that the council, upon the inquiry that they make, and then upon the production of that information, they run it through me just to make sure, because that would be my goal, is to protect any confidential information from employees, former employees, or whoever it may be. But yes, not everything would be public if it has to do with personnel.
Okay, so would you fault Lisa for coming to you with it first, making sure it was legal, making sure she could release that information beforehand, or?
I mean, I'm not here to fault anybody. What I would say is, if there was an inquiry, and I don't mind stating that Councilwoman Fuller asked me a question before going forward, which was appropriate, if certain information was public or producible, and to the extent that something has to do with personnel matters, it's not public information, and it's not something that individual council members, whomever it is privy to without a decision by the body to proceed forward. And so I think this is the appropriate step if the body wants to proceed forward on something like that.
Real quick, can I interject something? Because we're not being very transparent in the way we're having this conversation. It is my understanding, and I have not heard from Councilman Fuller or any other about exactly what it is. Tom, you and I have talked a few times about this. It is my understanding that this agenda item is in regards to us releasing to council the confidential personnel file, including investigation and disciplinary action, and releasing that information to council members. And my stance is, I don't feel like that's appropriate. And what kind of precedent are we setting there? It's hard enough for us to find employees, and if we start releasing private, confidential information, even just to council members, about individual employees, disciplinary action, personnel files, how much harder will it be for us to get employees? I do not have issue with giving the information to the individual. They have a right to review their own personnel file. But I don't think that it's right for us as an employer to provide that information to anyone else. Tom, you have reviewed the information for this specific employee and the investigation, and you said to me in my office when you reviewed it, there was no issue with that investigation and the disciplinary action. Is that correct?
I don't know what all the scope of this is going to be. If it is a review of personnel decisions, then I would agree that there's personnel matters go to a certain point, and it's not typically within the scope of the council to oversee personnel decisions. So I don't know what the scope of the inquiry is going to be until I see the inquiry or the investigation. But if that, and we're sort of speculating here, but if that's what it is, then it's probably not appropriate for the council to oversee individual personnel decisions.
So there is no scope? So what would council be voting on today then if there is no scope for this inquiry? That would be my question, and that was my question to you the other day, Tom.
Well, the statute doesn't require a particularly narrow scope. The statute requires that, or allows the council to inquire or investigate. And it doesn't say with certain specificity. So I think that scope would be analyzed based on, I mean, there's going to be an additional step here. My recommendation is, if the council approves to go forward with an investigation or an inquiry or whatever they call it, they make some sort of written request to me, to city staff, or whomever is the appropriate person, and at that point there can be a discussion as to whether that is something contemplated by the statute. And it very well may be, and the statute's pretty broad, and council has a pretty broad scope in which they can investigate. So
My only issue with this is I don't see, like what we're investigating here. Like what are we looking into? Because I'd rather see it on the agenda, an actual item, what we are looking into, why are we doing this, rather than just opening up an investigation. Because it gives a lot of people knee-jerk reactions when they see this on our agenda. And I just don't, I want to see it more in detail, what we're actually investigating.
And you're exactly right. And there's some difficulty with being that specific depending on what the intent of the investigation is. If the investigation is a personnel matter, then it would be difficult to protect an employee, former employee, whatever it is, by put specific information in the agenda.
Okay, wouldn't those conversations be better had before we put something on the agenda?
Perhaps,
Okay.
but
And my concern with you, Tom, was that if this is an investigation into me and my actions, it should be an investigation under executive session. I am an employee of the city of Durant. And it was my understanding from what I'm told is it's not an investigation into me per se. It has to do with one specific employee that is no longer working for the city of Durant.
and that may be true. I don't know that, but Title 25, Section 307(1) that governs executive sessions. You're right. If this were a matter where the council was being asked by a particular member to consider your employment, promotion, demotion, discipline of you, you're right, that would be an executive session matter. And if that's what this is, then upon those inquiries, I will advise the council, hey, you need to circle back and do this through a different route rather than an inquiry under Title 11-10-106, go back through Title 25, Section 307(1), and do it in executive session and talk about the city manager's job.
So real quick, you and I had another conversation about this.
You don't have to keep
because-
reminding me what conversations we had.
I know, but I want to remind you because nobody else was privy to this conversation
I
that took
understand.
place in my office,
I
okay?
understand.
We spoke about how this was placed on the agenda because the statute reads investigation into the conduct of the office of, or offices, division, so on and so forth.
Sure.
And my comment to you was that it says office. It doesn't say officer, and there's a difference, and you told me it's the same difference. So it's not under definitions on the Open Records Act. Public office means physical location where public bodies conduct business or keep records. Public official means any official or employee of any public body is defined herein. This was not placed on the agenda appropriately.
I don't think anybody's investigating the four walls of the building in
No,
which
but the office would include the
Let me-
employees in
let-
my administration.
Let me finish. I don't make any distinction here between the office of the city manager and the city manager. If we were investigating the President of the United States, you could say the office of the President. And we're not investigating the four walls. I don't think that's the proposal here. It's decisions made by the city manager, I assume. I don't know that because I don't know exactly what this is about.
The office,
So
the office
from a
would
legal
include
standpoint,
HR.
I'm just telling you that it's my opinion that there's no difference
Right.
between the office of the city manager and the city manager.
But the Open Records Act gives the definitions clearly.
The Open Records Act is specifically pointing to the four walls. It says the office.
For public office.
Mhm.
Public official or officer is something different. It's a person.
You're right.
Right.
You're
The
exactly right.
statute is what says office. It's not a person. My administration office includes HR. It includes grants. It includes several different departments under the office of the city manager. So it does make a difference in how it was put on the agenda.
Okay.
Because it makes an assumption about me, and that's unfair.
I don't know what the inquiry is. That may be directly what it is. I don't know.
Then that should have been what it is. It should have been a discussion in executive session.
This doesn't have anything to do, Lisa. We're not gunning for you here. This is not a witch hunt.
Mm.
I just would like to see some information so I could answer our public honestly of information that I was not available to receive. And so, since this is the proper way to go about doing that, this is how it happened. It has nothing to do with being on a witch hunt.
I am curious, did the party that was fired file for Open Records Act?
It's my understanding, yes.
Okay,
Those don't come to me, by the way. Those go through the city clerk and are
Okay.
shared with our city attorney.
Okay,
I don't know whether that's been
Have you
fulfilled.
seen that yet?
I believe that there was, that a public employee is always entitled to their own personnel file, whether they were a current employee or a former employee. Other people aren't entitled to personnel files, but the employee or former employee is always entitled to their personnel file.
Okay. So
Whether that's been fulfilled, I'm not sure. Cindy's out.
But it has been filed, obviously, so
I believe so.
I think that would probably be the best recourse action, just to, let the employee that was fired find out the information first, and then we go from there. If she doesn't get the information, she can't share it with everybody, then I think it would come to the council. Then I just think putting it on our agenda this soon. When was this employee fired?
Listen, hang on. We've gotten a little far afield. There's not been any designation of the line of inquiry.
Well, I will.
I mean,
I will
so
say this.
we're talking about terminated employees, and I think that we're getting on thin ice a little bit.
Okay, a phone conversation I had with a council member specifically stated that it was about an employee's firing and that they couldn't get the information released to them. That come from a council member sitting here right now on a telephone call to me.
I don't know anything about that. I know public employees or former public employees should always have access to their personnel file.
Okay, and they have it, right?
I don't know.
I mean,
Tom, you
don't
would know
control
whether it
that.
had been because you redact every request we get, right? And you haven't received anything to redact, is that correct? For this specific request?
There shouldn't be anything to redact in someone's own personnel file.
I understand, but it's my understanding Cindy sends everything to you or IT sends things to you for redaction
I
before
get
they're
sent
released.
things. I don't know if I get sent everything. I look at everything I'm sent, but I don't know if I'm
Okay,
sent everything.
it was my understanding you got to have a say or look for redaction on everything, so that's my mistake if you don't.
I don't know. I mean, I do get things, but I don't know if I get everything.
Okay. Well, you probably would get that one, I would assume. I don't know.
So, Tom, for the public, how does a council person answer a question from someone who says, hey, how come so-and-so got treated this way or got released or promoted, since we cannot talk about, when we have no, that's not our area. We don't have any say-so in it.
You hit it on the head. It's not your area. And that's the short answer is if somebody asks a council member about a different person's employment, discipline, termination, suspension, you say, I don't know, that's not within our umbrella.
But I think that also,
That's a matter for the administration, the executive branch of the government.
we're responsible for the city manager, right? And she makes all the decisions. We don't have any say of who gets hired or fired. The only thing we can do is hold her accountable, and this is just a form of accountability, is all it is.
And by the way, I think that's right. You're both right. You don't comment over individual employees, good, bad, or otherwise. You may think an employee was done dirty, or you may think an employee was great and somebody else out here doesn't. But that's not for council members, either individually or as a collective, to comment on. However, I think if there is a desire to find out how the administration, the executive branch, is dealing with employment issues, that certainly is within the council's authority to inquire through the city manager about employment policy. So you're both right.
Any further discussion? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve item 1B. Do I need to read it?
No, we've already read it. We have a motion on the floor to approve item 1B on the administration's agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. The clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Fuller,
Aye.
Councilmember Miller,
No.
Councilmember Shear,
No.
Vice Mayor Simulescu,
Yes.
Mayor Tucker.
Yes. Item number 1C, and I apologize to the public who are attending here. The purpose for this meeting is a budget workshop for the upcoming budget year that begins July 1. And this workshop is to include presentations and discussion on the preliminary budget product that we have. So I believe the city manager has a presentation.
You want to flip then? I don't think mine's working. There we go. Sorry, y'all, that's kind of hard to see up there. I have a mouse if you'll let me do it. Ready? Okay, we just put together, I want to thank my finance staff for putting together the presentation today. We wanted to show our this year actual, previous year actual, and projections and proposed. You'll see on the 2% sales tax that goes into our general fund that we operate off of, 2021, or I'm sorry, 2020, 2021 actual was 8.8 million. Budget for 22-23 was 8.3, but the projection to the end of the year is going to be 9.9, almost $1 million. We're proposing budget of 9.1, just over 9.1 million for the next year. Capital improvements, actual budget for 21-22 was $4,780,000. The projection for 22-23 is going to be 4.9, which is over budget. And you're going to notice that's a theme throughout this in most of these categories, is that we're over budget. That has to do with inflation, materials, supplies, equipment, everything that we're using to run and operate the city is costing significantly more money. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm sure everybody can feel it in their pocketbooks at home. And a copy of this will be available after the meeting. So revenue by source, you'll see there, beginning unencumbered money for the year is almost 2.5 million. And taxes, 14.4 million. We bring in money for license and permits, 363,000. Recreation activities, which we hope to increase in the future, about 68,000. Charges that we charge for services, 34,000. Municipal court revenue, 581,000. Miscellaneous revenues, 189,000. Transfer from utilities authority. This is where we get in trouble every year. We're stealing from our utilities authority. We're looking at 2.3 million for a total of $20,437,328. This shows our expenditures by department for the city of Durant. And you'll see the largest parts of our budget go into public safety, law enforcement, and fire department, to be specific there. We do have fairly large departments for both police and fire. I'll remind you that we do cover about 27.7 square miles in the city of Durant. And we do provide public safety. We provide, road maintenance, utilities, so on and so forth. So that's to be expected. The Utilities Authority fund balance, again, this shows our projections for the following year and our proposed budget. Our proposed budget, if you look at, water sales, if we're over, if we're, sewer, sanitation, all of those things, we're budgeting more than we've projected for this year. We're going to have to increase our revenue. The Utilities Authority expenses, again, those are going through the roof. I believe, Philip Hightower has done a good job of educating our community about the cost of just chemicals to run the water plant or the wastewater treatment plant, either one. Fuel, we run trucks to sorts over in Ardmore every day, transferring stuff from the landfill. And then we have our other funds that we spend money in. We do the holiday lights, risk management. We do employee insurance. Part of our sales tax that comes in, they're specific to certain things. We have an economic development sales tax that goes for economic development projects for DIA. We have, the tourism tax. All of these things come through the city, and they are expended out to those other entities. And here are other funds, and I'm going to ask Ms. Ann Chin to come up. She had some specific things she wanted to make sure, points we wanted to make in this.
The first one is Spatial 911, and the second one is Durant Airport Authority, and the third one DCFA, and the fourth one is Multi-Sport Complex, and then Cemetery Operating. And you can see that all this fund is, we transfer money to subsidize their expense. So for example, the first one, the 911, that their revenue is about $580,000. And then I use their beginning fund balance, $90,000, and then we have to transfer from, actually it's DCUA, $400,000 to cover all their expenditure. And then the transfer out, this is the one that we paid out for the equipment liability insurance, all this stuff. And the Durant Airport, the same situation. Sorry. The Durant Airport Authority, the same, that I use the beginning fund balance $87,000, and I transferred in from the DCUA $460,000. And the DCFA, that is the fund that we pay out for our debt service, and some transfer to the Durant Multi-Sport Complex for their operating and capital improvement and everything. So next one is Multi-Sport Complex, the same, that we transfer in $651,000 to cover their expense. And cemetery operating, that we sell the lot, but it's not enough to cover their expenditure. So the same, that we transfer $90,000 to cover their expense. This is the how we transfer for the other funds in from the DCUA. Any question?
For the remainder of the time, I'll allow council members, if you have questions in specific parts of the budget, all of our department heads are here and are able to answer questions. I do want to note that despite sending this out early on, y'all have had it for a bit, we've received no questions in from council yet. So I would ask for patience with us.
Any questions from council members? I have some very simple questions, and they're not really directed at department heads. In this budget for, I think it's described as personal expenses, but I would call that salary and fringe benefits. What is the total head count for the city that's included in this budget? Or you can tell me later. You don't have to tell me now.
I believe it's 242.
I believe that is about 250.
About 250?
Yeah, that is for the, how much head
Okay.
count we
And-
have.
And,
but
and my next question is on open positions. How many of those approved positions are open at this point? About?
That's.
Don't know.
I have to
About-
And I
check.
know we don't have an HR.
About 20.
About 20?
Somewhere in there. Open
Okay.
at the moment, but we're doing interviews regularly, and that
Right.
number honestly changes every single day.
And-
We've
and
had
so-
some people that have left employment this week, so.
And so in this budget versus the prior year budget, is there new headcount?
Yes, so we're proposing to end a contract that we have and hire 2 employees to replace it. That is a janitorial contract. And we're proposing to replace that with 2 full-time employees who could provide building maintenance, I believe is what we're calling it. And it would be, landscaping, things like that outside. So mowing the grass, edging, weed eating, taking care of the outside of the properties, also doing some internal maintenance and cleaning services for us. If that part is, of course, we'll have to come back to council. If the budget is approved, we will have to come back to council and ask for the positions to be
Positions,
created. But if we were able to do that, it could alleviate some of the time that our parks department is spending on cleaning of restrooms and mowing of city facilities, city buildings such as City Hall and places like that, where they could keep their time focused in the parks.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Now, in again, back to the salary and fringe, because this is a lot of what the budget is, obviously. Is there, and it's hard to read because it's just line by line by line, so I'll just ask these general overall questions. What is the increase, or is there like a cost of living adjustment year over year in the budget?
So I believe what we put in there, again, this is just a budget, we would have to come to council with any proposals. But what we put in there was, I think it was 3% for management, and then everything that's below management, we based it on a 5%. The CPI is it 8 or 9, Ann Chin?
About 7%.
Yeah, the answer is
7%?
yes.
Okay.
It is.
So if we gave everyone that worked for the city of Durant a 5% pay increase right now, we actually
Still be
didn't
dollars
really give
behind.
them an increase.
Yeah.
They actually lost salary, so.
So going through the binder, and I know everyone has studiously, right? It's described by a fund, and then each fund has revenue, and then each fund has expenses, different, capital expense, operating expense, payroll expense, so forth and so on and so on. So, and I saw your PowerPoint, which was really helpful to me. That would have answered some of my questions. But I gather, are there 19 funds that we operate? And I saw a couple of funds on there that had $0 balances in them. So maybe there's 21 funds, but nothing going through a couple of those funds that aren't being used, perhaps. And I know the general fund is one of the larger ones, right? That's obviously where most of the staff get paid out of that. So some of the funds have dollars transferred in, some have dollars transferred out. I noticed on the DCUA, and I know we're trying to do this the right way, we reduced the budgeted transfer amount by $1.7 million, right? This year it was $4 million, and we've already transferred out $3 million. And as Ann will tell you, we've gone negative on the transfers out. We're starting to eat up the fund balance now, which, to me is something to be excited about, and I don't want to get everyone else excited about it, but that can't last very long, obviously. So this is a tighten your belt budget significantly, unless and until we can increase the revenue to the city through either sales tax or other sources of revenue. So I wanted to point that out to everyone. Now, I guess the question I should have asked, everyone wants to say, is this a balanced budget? We're not going in the hole on this budget, right?
It is a balanced budget.
I think you're
By law,
required to
has
make it
be,
balanced,
yes.
right?
Yes.
But I have to ask the question so everyone knows, yes, this is a balanced budget. It has to be. And so at this point in time, it is. Now, we had met a few weeks ago and talked about some of the CapEx or capital expense purchases. Instead of buying these things, looking at the alternative of perhaps leasing some of these larger items. Has any work been done toward that end?
Yeah, so we're looking into leasing some of those items, and I apologize, I don't have that new proposed budget for capital improvement in front of me right now. But we did focus on purchasing some of those, most important items. Our vac truck is down. As you know, that's important for our sewer system here in town. It is very dated.
That's one of the items that is in here. It's like
That is one of the.
$330 or
it was
$375?
$525,000 for that truck,
Okay.
and it can be used across multiple departments. Fire department can use it, water department can use it, M&O can use it. So it's a very significantly important piece of equipment. And there, I say we prioritized and picked out the most important, but I'll say that every single item that was on that $25 million proposed capital improvement
No, it's all
request,
important.
it was all
It's all
important. We just had to pick the items that
Now,
were.
are there any department
immediate.
head, I guess they know, I guess they've seen what's, because all the department heads for everyone else sent us a list of everything they want, everything they need. And then we just had to go through and look at, well, here's how much money we have,
Right.
okay? So then we had to go through and say, yes, no, a lot more no's than there were yeses. But to get down to where we had enough money in the budget to actually pay for the things that we thought had criticality about them. I would like to hear from the department heads if they really feel like there was something that we made a poor decision on. I'm open to that critique and say, listen, you should have put this in the budget and taken his or her thing out of the budgets, and I'm open to that.
I don't believe that finalized capital improvement budget has been
Okay.
shared yet. It will
So-
be shared along with this part by the end of next week, is
Okay.
it? By the 19th? Or the,
This
by the
weekend.
19th, okay.
I think that's valuable, again, because this is, you guys do what you do. I don't do what you do. And so I can look at a report and say, well, that doesn't sound as critical to me as maybe the other thing. And I don't have all that information. And that's why the department heads are here. That's why we're having this meeting, so that we can actually make the best decision and make the best budget that we possibly can with the information that we have. But again, I don't treat water, I don't treat sewer, I don't do the things that you guys do. And so that's why I'm asking for that input for you all, so that we make the best decisions on the budget. Now, not that we can't change the budget, but once we approve the budget, then we have to have another special meeting to sit here and change the budget and have this conversation. We'd love to get it right as best we can the first time. Now, there's always going to be changes, and Chin has to move money between line items every month. You guys have seen all those reports. That's just how this works.
And real quick, we will not approve the final budget until the June regular
Right.
council meeting. So
Right.
that final proposed budget will go out to everyone by the end of this week.
But I want
Yeah.
to make sure that don't gain any comfort level from, we're not going to approve it until later. It's
Yeah.
the middle of May, people, right now. And so the June council meeting is the first week of June. So it's not long. We have to get this figured out quickly. And again, I think it's very positive for the city as far as being good fiscal operators to reduce that reliance, at least budget-wise, on the utilities authority, because that was never the design, that was never the intent. And so we've taken $1.7 million off of that operating fund to figure out other ways to fund the rest of the city's operations. This is hard to do in a growing. And those of you that own your own business and you've seen your business flourish and grow, it's the same challenge that you had then, because it just eats up all the cash you can possibly rake in, and you're still short of money every week and every day. It's a blessing and a curse. I get that, but this is us here trying to do the best we can to continue to grow the city.
Mr. Mayor, if I may for just a minute, I think you made some really good points, and I just want to kind of stress for particularly the new council members that haven't been through this process before, the budget sometimes gets taken really lightly because it's deep, it's not necessarily easily understood because there's a lot of things going on and a lot of minutia to it. But from a council perspective, you really have to anticipate approving the budget, and that sets everything in motion, and you really have to anticipate nothing ever coming back to you. And once you approve that budget, then it's up to the department heads to work within that budget, and they don't necessarily have to come back to the council every time they want to do something that's a little bit different, or if they have a need arise. As long as their budget allows them to do that, they get to kind of manage that. So it's really important for the council to look at those budgets, because it's like sending your kid out into the world. They may come back and ask for help, or they may not. But in this case, you have to be prepared for it not to come back, and once you set it in motion, that's the year. Now, very often, and probably almost every regular council meeting, we have some sort of budget amendment for something that came up that may have not been anticipated, or equipment breaks down or something like that. But I think you've made some really good points about how important it is to consider it, and once you send it out, it's the budget for the year.
The other thing that I would add, and thank you, Tom. The other thing I would add is, and I do this for other organizations' budget. There are going to be some things in here, council, that you're like, I don't know what that means, but it must be okay. Ask the question, okay? No one assumes that you know these people do this for a living. This is every day to them. Some of these things we've never heard of. Ask the question. They'll be happy to explain it, or we'll get the explanation from the city manager. But you have to know what it is that we're. There's a ton of acronyms in here, over and over and over. So that would be my encouragement to you over the next coming days. So I don't have any more questions. I'll quit hogging up the.
I just had one. I know we're tightening the belt, and that as I was looking through here, I noticed most departments had zero budget for overtime, and we're shorthanded. How are we going to go about realistically keeping that? Like, what's going to be in place to maintain that?
From the past history, that we will know that it's hard to hire some, those, how to say that, entry level people. And then, but those jobs, you still need someone to do it. So what we're going to do, we have to ask the current employee to do it. And so that's how the overtime occurred. Yeah.
So we're going to have zero of that this next year? We're going to have zero of overtime this next year? Because that's what's budgeted, zero.
To be honest with you, I don't think so.
That's my fear, is that it's a weak spot maybe in the budget where we need to plan for a little bit.
If we can find the people who work for us, then, but apparently I know a lot of departments, they cannot find the employee. That's the fact. Yeah.
What departments are you talking about that has zero?
There's no, I don't.
As I was flipping through it, just as I would come across departments, there was a little bit of a
Some
budget
is
for last
zero,
year, but
some
most
is
of the
zero. For example,
next
our
year's
department,
budget
we don't
said
have-
zero.
We don't have the overtime budget. Yeah.
So what that'll be is one of those monthly fund-to-fund transfers to pay for the overtime as it occurs. That's what that will be.
Now, obviously, they're not all zero. There are some that have money in them, but for instance, like the fire department, the overtime budget's cut in half, and we well exceeded it this last year. So just.
So I'll tell you, I'll address that on police and fire. There are some things that we're working on in negotiations that will help cut way down on that overtime cost. It may or may not cut down on the number of hours, but it'll cut down on the costs associated. And I will say that we've had really good experience with salaried employees stepping in and picking up the slack if there are vacancies and such. So that's been a little bit of a help as well. So.
And by the way, the budget is just a number that we assume that we're going to just spend. But if we don't spend it, it will roll over to the fund balance. So it will not because you budget this amount and you have to spend it. If you are not spending it, the end of the year, it will go back to your fund balance, the beginning fund balance. So if any money remain for the following year, you did not spend it, it go to the beginning fund balance, and we can use it for the following year or what, yeah. So this is not, you have to spend it, it's just a budget, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'll say also, hopefully, we can see an increase in pay for those lower positions, or lower paid positions, which will help us in our ability to attract talent. So that's the biggest driver for our overtime.
Any other comments? We're here all day, budget workshop.
I got a question. I was looking through streets and infrastructure. What are y'all's plans for the budget for this upcoming years to address our street and infrastructure issues?
As far as paving,
Philip, can you come up front, please? Sorry.
What fund is that? What page is that on?
16.
as you know, in our capital improvements, we did ask for money to improve some of the street lights and stuff like that. As far as his paving and maintenance, that budget comes out of his operational budget with $360,000. We use that to overlay, if we can, a street, weave, to fix potholes and stuff like that.
I think it's about 5,000 different from last year's budget is why Dr. Sims is asking that, because it's relatively flat.
Right, but also we haven't spent all that money previously is why I was asking, because it seems there's a big gap. You may have spent it somewhere else, but at least what was allocated for some of that stuff wasn't really spent. That's why I was wondering.
And this, just to remind everyone, the year-to-date totals on there were ending April 30th.
Sure.
So.
But the
And they're-
previous year,
Right. Yeah.
the previous year has a bunch left over. That's why I was asking. I was just, I understand that part. I wouldn't expect the year-to-date to be spent.
Well, that's what we're using for the mill and overlays, yeah. Which we have bids out for mill and overlay, and we have $1.2 million for this year.
Okay.
And we're waiting on bids to return. We're opening bids on May 25th for that. We bid it once. We had to cut a few streets off because it was over budget. So we went out, rebid it, and
And another thing is that amount will not be in this budget because it's going to roll over from the prior year after we install this budget, and I will roll over all the project that unfinished balance to this year. So you will not see it on the 23-24. When we install this budget, I think it's September, and then I'll do the first budget amendment to roll over all the capital improvement that we call the still in process, and the balance on that 9 items to this 23-24 budget.
Okay.
So you're saying, Philip, we're going to use this up this year? Is what
we're going to
you're
use
saying?
part
We're gonna
of
use
that
it?
up this year, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I actually tried to do some back in the fall, and we tabled it because of the university project going on.
Oh.
We didn't want to shut roads down in other parts of town, and so we've kind of put it on the back burner. But we've identified some streets that are far enough from university that it shouldn't bother them. So, any other questions?
No, it's all after that.
Any more questions or comments, discussion on the budget? Humphrey says no. Danny? Nothing? Okay. No other questions, no discussions. Hearing none, I'll consider a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. The clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Froler,
Aye.
Councilmember Miller,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Simulescu,
Yes.
Mayor Tucker.
Aye, we're adjourned. Thank you.
That was a lot shorter than I thought it was gonna be. Oh. How are you, sir? I thought Bigfoot was over on the east side. He does. That's where he works at anyway. How you guys doing?